Inside America's prison industry, the business of locking people up, America is known as the land of freedom, a nation built on the promise that anyone, regardless of where they come from, can achieve a better life. But behind the stars and stripes lies another America, an America hidden behind concrete walls, steel bars, and miles of razor wire. An America that incarcerates more people than any other nation on earth. More than 1 million people wake up each morning inside America's prisons and jails. But what if prisons are no longer just places of punishment? What if they have become part of a billion-dollar business? This is the story of America's prison industry. A story of power, a story of profit, and a story that raises uncomfortable questions about justice itself. For most of American history, prisons were seen as institutions designed to punish crime and protect society. But beginning in the 1970s, something changed. Crime rates rose, fear spread across the country. Politicians promised to be tougher on crime. The war on drugs was launched. New sentencing laws were introduced. Judges were given less flexibility. Prison sentences became longer. And the number of people behind bars began to soar. Year after year, prison populations grew. States struggled to keep up. Existing facilities became overcrowded. New prisons were needed, fast. That demand created an opportunity. Private companies stepped forward with a proposal. They would build and operate prisons on behalf of governments, and they would do it for profit. By the first time in modern America, incarceration became a business opportunity. Supporters argued that private prisons would reduce costs and improve efficiency. Critics saw something very different. They questioned whether a company should earn money from keeping human beings behind bars. The debate continues to this day. But prisons themselves are only one part of a much larger industry. Around every prison exists an entire economic ecosystem. Companies provide food, healthcare services, telephone systems, security technology, transportation, construction, surveillance equipment, and countless other services. Billions of dollars flow through this system every year. For some communities, prisons have even become major employers. Entire towns depend on correctional facilities for jobs and economic survival. In these places, prisons are not just institutions, they are industries. Local economies bend around them. Restaurants, motels, and gas stations near prison towns often depend on the traffic of families visiting loved ones. Construction companies win contracts to expand facilities. Vendors compete fiercely for contracts to supply food, uniforms, and medical care. In some rural areas, a single prison can be the largest employer for 50 miles in any direction. When a prison closes, entire towns can collapse economically overnight. This dependency creates a strange incentive. Communities that once feared crime now fear empty cells. Fewer inmates can mean fewer jobs, fewer contracts, less revenue for local governments. It is a paradox at the heart of the system. Safety and survival have become tangled together in ways few imagined decades ago. But behind every statistic is a human story. Inside prison walls, life is often defined by routine. Wake up, count, work, lockdown, repeat. For many inmates, prison becomes a world completely separated from society. Families are left behind. Children grow up without parents. Relationships break apart. Years disappear. Some prisoners use their time to learn new skills and prepare for life after release. Others struggle with violence, isolation, addiction, and mental health challenges. The experience can leave lasting scars. Phone calls home are often expensive, sometimes costing far more per minute than a typical call outside prison walls. Visits are limited, monitored, and sometimes located hours away from where a person's family lives. For children, a parent's incarceration can mean years of holidays spent without them. Birthdays, graduations, first days of school, all missed. Psychologists who study incarceration describe a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the person behind bars. Spouses lose income. Households lose stability. Communities lose trust in institutions meant to protect them. And for many, the hardest part begins after they leave prison. A criminal record can close doors. Finding employment becomes difficult. Housing opportunities shrink. Social stigma follows them wherever they go. Without support, many former inmates find themselves trapped in a cycle that seems impossible to escape. Some return to prison within just a few years of release. Researchers call this cycle recidivism. Supporters of reform argue that without housing, job training, and mental health care, release is simply a delay before another arrest. Opponents argue that personal responsibility, not systemic failure, determines who succeeds after release. The debate, like so much about the prison system, refuses easy answers. One of the most controversial aspects of the prison system is inmate labor. Across America, prisoners perform a wide variety of jobs. Some maintain prison facilities, others manufacture products, some assist with public services. In several states, inmates have even been deployed to fight wildfires, working long, dangerous shifts for a small fraction of what professional firefighters earn. Others work in laundries, kitchens, call centers, or manufacturing lines that produce goods sold far beyond prison walls. Supporters argue that work programs provide valuable experience and help inmates develop discipline and responsibility. They point to skills training, certifications, and a sense of purpose that structured labor can offer. Critics argue that the wages are often extremely low, sometimes only a few cents per hour. They question whether inmates are receiving fair compensation for their labor, or whether the system simply profits from people who have little choice but to work. The debate raises difficult questions. When does rehabilitation become exploitation? And who truly benefits from prison labor? Another issue continues to divide the nation: the relationship between race, poverty, and incarceration. For decades, researchers, activists, and policymakers have debated whether the criminal justice system treats all Americans equally. Many studies have highlighted disparities in arrests, sentencing, and incarceration rates among different communities. Critics argue that poverty often increases the likelihood of entering the criminal justice system, citing the cost of legal representation, bail, and fines that can trap low-income defendants in the system longer than wealthier ones. Supporters maintain that law enforcement and courts are simply enforcing existing laws, and that disparities reflect differences in crime rates rather than bias. The discussion remains deeply controversial, yet one fact is undeniable. The prison system affects millions of American families every year, cutting across race, geography, and income in ways that touch nearly every community in the country. Today, calls for reform are growing louder. Some states have reduced prison populations. Others have expanded educational programs, drug treatment initiatives, and rehabilitation services. A growing number of facilities now offer college courses, vocational certifications, and re-entry counseling designed to prepare inmates for life on the outside. Some states have experimented with shorter sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, redirecting funding toward treatment instead of incarceration. Advocates argue that prisons should focus on preparing people to return to society, not simply punishing them. Opponents worry that reducing sentences could threaten public safety, pointing to cases where early release has led to repeat offenses. The nation remains divided. As America looks toward the future, a fundamental question remains unanswered. What is the true purpose of prison? Is it punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation, or something else entirely? The answer will shape the lives of millions of people for generations to come. Because prisons are more than buildings. They are reflections of society itself. They reveal what a nation fears, what it values, and how it chooses to define justice. The prison industry stands at the crossroads of law, politics, economics, and human rights. Its story is not simply about crime. It is about power, it is about profit, and ultimately, it is about people. People who made mistakes, people seeking redemption, people demanding accountability, and a nation still struggling to decide what justice should look like. This is not just a story about prisons, it is a story about America. And the question that remains is simple. When freedom has a price, who pays the cost?